Alright, so now we're ready to talk about the accessory structures of the skin. The accessory structures include the nails, the fingernails and the toenails, the hair follicles and the hairs that grow from them. And so I have here a picture of a hair follicle sliced, and this is the area where the hair grows, and then the hair grows up, and comes out of the opening at the end of the follicle. Oil glands are also an accessory structure, and here is a slice through an oil gland, the sebaceous glands, when they dump their oily secretion through a duct into the hair follicle itself. And then finally the sweat glands, or the sudoriferous glands, and some of the sweat glands will release their secretion like the sebaceous gland does into the hair follicle. Other sweat glands release directly to the apical surface of the skin through a duct and a pore. So here we see the sweat-producing region of the sweat gland, and then this is the duct that leads up toward the surface, and then here at the surface we would see a pore or an opening down into that duct. Accessory structures form during early embryonic development, and they form as cells here at the stratum basale. So this is the basement membrane, so this would be stratum basale through here. Those cells grow and divide rapidly and push their way down into the developing dermis tissue, and as they grow down, they continue to multiply, and they grow and differentiate into the specialized cells of the accessory structure, whether they're a secreting cell like a sebaceous gland cell, or a rapidly dividing hair bulb cell that will grow a hair. Okay, so let's take a look at the accessory structures. And what we're seeing here is a slice across, or a long section, through a finger. So here's the bone and cartilage in the finger itself, just the tip of the phalange. This is muscular tissue, and here we can see the nail plate. That's the visible attached portion of the nail that we see, that is adhered or continuous with the skin or the epithelial tissues beneath the nail. And the nail itself is composed of many, many layers of dead keratinized cells that are strongly adhered to each other. The nail bed is a region of specialized epithelial cells that are continuous with the skin and underlie the nail plate. And so the nail bed is down here beneath the nail plate, and it contributes the cells to the developing nail plate. But where most of the cells that we see in a nail come from is from a region of very rapidly dividing, thicker region of epithelial cells, and that is referred to as the lunula. So here we can see it from the top, a nail from the top. Keratin is a translucent, that means the light kind of passes through it, and somewhat whitish protein. And where the fingernail actually attaches to the nail bed, so here in this region, we can see through the keratin in the nail and down to the dermal blood supply. And that blood supply gives the nails a pinkish color. So regardless of your skin color, nails have a bright pink color in a healthy person because there's so much good rich blood supply in the dermis beneath the nail. Here where at the distal end of the nail, where it's no longer attached to the nail bed, the nail itself is white because of that thick layer of that keratin material, which is whitish. And then finally, at the proximal end of the nail, is the lunula, and here, because the epithelial layers are so thick and the cells there are especially active, they're thick enough that they actually obscure the dermal blood supply. and so we can't see it as easily, and so it's white there as well. Okay, so let's see, what else is there to say? I think that's about all we have to say about the nails, except that as the cells of the lunula grow and divide, that pushes the whole nail plate toward the distal end of the fingertips and off of the skin, creating this margin here where the nail plate is no longer attached to the epidermal tissues beneath. Okay, so let's talk hair follicles and hair then. We find hair on all the skin except for the palms and the soles, so the thick skin. And we don't find any hair on the lips themselves, the nipples, and on some parts of the external genitalia. So what is hair for? Well, the first thing is that it insulates the body. One thing that you may have noticed about yourself is when you get chilly, then you get goosebumps. That raises the hair up. Now, if we had really thick hair on our skin, like, say, a dog or a cat has, raising that hair up would trap a layer of skin or a layer of air right up close to the skin. We could warm it and it would be trapped there, and so it would provide lots of insulation. So we see insulation both to maintain body heat and also to prevent environmental heat from warming the body too much. It also blocks foreign materials from entering into the eyes, the ears, the nose. So, if you're out in a sandstorm, you'll squinch up your eyes so that the eyelashes and your eyebrows can help keep the sand from getting into your eyes. We have hairs in our ears that keep foreign things out of our ears, and also we have guard hairs in our noses to help slow down the flow of air enough that whatever particles are in the air won't be breathed in all the way into the lungs. And then finally, it helps to prevent scrapes and abrasions too. So the hair, like if you get bumped into something with your head, then you kind of slide off of it with your hair rather than being able to scrape at the skin underneath. So lots of functions associated with hair. So what are the structures that we see associated with hair follicles and hair? So the hair follicle itself is a tube-like depression. So if this is the skin surface, we have a depression in the skin, and it is surrounded by epidermal cells. So we've got epidermal cells all around it, and then of course the epidermis. Those epidermal cells are continuous with the epidermis of the skin surface. Now, down at the bottom of the follicle, there's a region referred to as the hair bulb, and it's a region of very rapid hair cell division and growth. So, down in this area, stem cells are dividing and dividing, creating hundreds of thousands of cells very rapidly. And as the cells down here at the base of the hair bulb divide and grow, they push these layers upward. And so over time, with enough growth from down here at the bottom, you'll get a hair that will extend beyond the surface of the skin. Terrible drawing of the hair there, but I hope you get the idea. The papilla of the hair is a region of connective tissue below the hair bulb where there's a lot of very rich blood supply coming in. And so this brings in nutrients to help supply the cells that are growing, dividing to produce the hair. What we talk about as the hair root is the still living portion of the hair. So down here at the base, the hair cells are still growing and dividing. So down here, they're dividing up, as they make their way farther away from that hair bulb. Then growth slows until eventually you reach a point where all the cells are dead cells. That was supposed to be a little unhappy face with little X's for eyes. So that's where the cells are dead. So just like we see with cells in the stratum corneum of the epidermal layers, anything beyond the hair root is going to be dead cells. So these are all dead cells that are closely packed together, very tightly held together with desmosomes, and they make up the hair shaft. So the hair shaft is that portion of the hair cell that projects beyond the skin surface. Okay, so we've talked a lot about growth. Here's some more words that if you want to write them down to kind of keep track of it. But as those hair bulb cells divide, they push the already differentiated and mature cells toward the skin's surface. And there's also melanocytes down there in the hair bulb area, and they will produce the melanosomes, and the hair cells will pick up those melanin packets and incorporate that into the cell along with a bunch of keratin. So the gut cells, just like in the stratum corneum, they fill with keratin the further they get from the dermal papilla in the hair follicle. And so the cells become scale-like, they become very flattened, and they die. And so it's interesting, a hair follicle will produce a single strand of hair for anywhere between 2 and 6 years. And then it will take a several-month vacation and stop producing new, the hair bulb cells will stop dividing, and it'll rest. And then the follicle will become active again after several months of resting. And as new cells are developed, then the old hair that was there in place before the resting period, that old hair will fall out and be pushed out by the new hair that's growing. So some fun facts about hair. On average, a healthy person loses anywhere between 20 and 100 hairs a day. We have approximately 100,000 hairs in our scalp. Men have about 30,000 hairs in their beard. Some men more, some men a lot less. And ethnicity has a great is a great factor in determining how full and thick the hair in a man's beard is. At the base, in the region of the dermal papilla, there is a cluster of sensory nerve endings, and they wrap around that hair bulb. And so if the hair is moved or bent or jostled, then that causes these sensory fibers to fire, and that message is received in the brain that something has moved the hair. And so our arms or anywhere where there is hair can be very sensitive to, like an ant crawling across the skin as they, as they move that hair around, we can notice it. Pattern baldness, also known as androgenic alopecia, is a genetically determined condition, and it turns out pattern baldness is not just a male problem, but women, especially postmenopausal women, may have pattern baldness as well. Finally, there's a little cluster of smooth muscle fibers called the erector pili muscle. Notice the spelling of erector. So the erector pili muscle will, when it contracts, that's what pulls a hair upright. It also causes the skin surface to bunch up a little bit, producing what we talk about as a goosebump. Hair color is produced, again, by the melanocytes, and as melanocytes make melanosomes, then they transfer that melanin in the melanosomes to the hair cells. We see two types of melanin in hair. There's eumelanin, U meaning the true melanin. It is black and brown pigment, black or brown pigment. And then there's another type of melanin called pheomelanin. This is the sort of melanin that's seen in blonde and redheaded folk, and so it's the lighter colors of hair. And it turns out that hair color then is the result of the different ratios of eumelanin and pheomelanin that are produced in the hair, along with the amount of hair that is unpigmented too. And so with age, melanocyte activity decreases, and so hair becomes gray, and it grays as melanin production becomes less and less, and then eventually, if a person lives long enough, or if they tend to be a premature gray person, the hair becomes white, and that would be hair that has no melanin in it at all. And so my father now has become white-haired, and he's in his late 70s. Let's see, he would be 77 now, so he has no melanin at all being produced in his hair, and his hair is very white. So a range of hair colors that we see now in people, and it all relates back to the amount of melanin that's being produced. Oh, there's one last. What just happened? Sorry, I went the wrong way. I'm still going the wrong way. Let's try this again. Okay, back to here. So I do want to make the point that hair, all people have the same number of melanocytes in their skin and in their hair, and it's not the number of melanocytes, but it's their activity that determines hair color as well. So the younger people, the melanocytes are very active, but as we age, the melanocytes become less and less active. Okay, so sorry about all that moving back and forth between the slides there. So the next of the accessory structures of the skin to look at are the sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands produce the oily secretions that help to lubricate and keep skin moist, or flexible, I should say, rather than moist. Sebaceous glands are found in all skin except for the thick skin of the palms and the sole, and they release their oils by, if you remember back to chapter 5, the process of holocrine secretion. That is, the cell fills up with oil and eventually ruptures, and so the cell dies, but in the dying process it releases the secretion. That secretion is named sebum. So sebum is the secretion, and it's a combination of the oils that the cell has produced along with all the cellular debris from that ruptured cell. And the sebum is released into the hair follicle. It's released as the erector pili muscle contracts, and that hair, or the oil, is released into the hair follicle, and it wicks up the hair itself and makes it to the surface of the skin, where it helps to keep the skin pliable and and flexible. Excess sebum production, generally associated with puberty in the teenage years, can clog the duct or even the whole follicle, producing a condition that we refer to as acne vulgaris. So here we can see a hair follicle. So here's the hair follicle, here's the hair bulb, and here is a sebaceous gland. And the duct enters into the follicle right there. So when this muscle, that's the involuntary muscle, the smooth muscle, that as it contracts, it squeezes on the cells of the sebaceous gland and forces the oils into the hair follicle, where it makes its way up to the skin surface, and it keeps the hair pliable and the skin as well. Okay, so those are the sebaceous glands. Now let's take a look at, oops, went the wrong way again. Here we are, the sudoriferous glands, also known as sweat glands. So we have approximately 2.5 million sweat glands spread out across the skin, and they're found in all skin except for the lips, the nipples, and again parts of the external genitalia. Now these are simple, so unbranching glands. The secretory region of it is coiled, and it's a tube, and they're found embedded down in the deep dermis, or sometimes even into the superficial subcutaneous layer that's beneath the skin. And there are two types of sweat glands. There are the eccrine sweat glands and the apocrine sweat glands. And so we'll talk about the eccrine sweat glands first. So here we actually can see some eccrine sweat glands. They're associated with thick skin. You can see the dermal ridges here making a fingerprint. And then you see scattered throughout the apical surface a number of sweat ducts, the ducts from the sweat glands. They're especially abundant, sweat glands are, in the skin of the forehead, the neck, the back, the palms, and the soles. So think of all the places that we get really sweaty in, and then of course add in the feet and the hands. The gland duct opens directly to the skin surface at a pore, so of course it's an exocrine gland. And we talk about them as merocrine glands. They release their secretion through merocrine secretion. So the sweat is released from the cell via exocytosis. And sweat is a clear, watery, hypotonic solution. So it's very dilute. But there are small amounts of salt and some nitrogenous wastes as well. So urea and uric acid may also be found in sweat. And sweat functions to regulate body temperature, or these eccrine sweat glands. Their secretion functions to regulate body temperature, as we've talked about already, and also helps to maintain water and ion balance, so we can get rid of excess water by sweating it out. Okay, so those are the eccrine sweat glands, and these are active fairly soon after birth, so it doesn't take long for eccrine sweat glands to get going, and we begin sweating that way. There's a second kind of sweat gland, though, and that's the apocrine sweat gland. So even though they are termed apocrine sweat glands, they also are merocrine glands. They produce or release their secretion through merocrine secretion, where they do exocytosis. But these glands, their duct opens not to the surface of the skin, but into a hair follicle, just like a sebaceous gland does. And they are very abundant in the axilla, so in the armpits, in the groin, and around the nipples as well. And they don't start producing a secretion until they are stimulated to do so by testosterone and estrogen. And so they begin secreting around puberty. And they produce an odorless, but unlike the eccrine sweat glands, it's a milky secretion. The milkiness is because it's filled with fats and proteins and even some carbohydrates, and but it's odorless. And I'm sure you're thinking, now, why would you say it's odorless, Chuck? Because everybody knows that once we hit puberty, our sweat becomes very stinky. Well, it's not because of the sweat. It's because of the bacteria that live in these regions that sweat glands become, or the sweat itself. As these bacteria are digesting the secretion, the sweat can take on a really strong, very musky odor that we associate as body odor. Now, no function has ever been ascribed to these, to the secretions of the apocrine sweat glands, but they are likely analogous, to the scent glands of other mammals, especially the scent glands that relate to sexual receptiveness and timing of the estrous cycle, that sort of thing. Okay, so the apocrine sweat glands, again, odorless, but they do become stinky. These secretions, as the bacteria on our skin go to town, eating, digesting the materials in the apocrine sweat and making them stinky. All right, so we also have two other accessory structures to the skin, and these are the ceruminous and mammary glands. And if you could look at them under the microscope, you would see that just like the sweat glands, they are simple, they're tubular, and they are coiled. So these are understood to be modified sweat glands. So the ceruminous glands, they secrete a secretion called cerumen, and it's a very water-repellent wax that is secreted onto the surface of the skin inside the ear canal. Excuse me. The cerumen helps to keep the eardrum pliable and also acts as a barrier to keep out foreign particles and water. So it helps to, it kind of waterproofs the eardrum and the ear canal as well. Also known as the external acoustic meatus, but we'll get there when we start looking at the skeleton. And then the mammary glands are also modified sweat glands. They produce milk through a process called lactation. And like the secretion that comes from the apocrine sweat glands, they produce a secretion that is rich in fat, proteins, and sugars. So that's what milk is milk fat. It's the milk proteins like casein and the sugars like lactose that we find in milk. So there we have it, the accessory structures of the skin, the fingernails and toenails, the hair follicles, the sweat glands, and then the modified sweat glands that produce earwax and milk. Alright, so that's it for this video. There's still 2 more coming, so keep your eyes out for them.